More than 3,000 years ago, while the rest of the world was still trying to understand life, the ancient Egyptians were already preparing for what comes after death. And they believed that if the body disappeared, the soul would be lost forever. So they created a secret process that took 70 days, using only desert salt, mysterious oils, and sacred rituals hidden inside temple walls. And the result was so powerful that some of their mummies still have skin, teeth, and even fingerprints visible today. But what makes this even more disturbing is that they did not use just one method, because they designed 3 different systems of preservation based on wealth and status, meaning that even after death, your place in society decided how long you would survive against time. This is not just a story about dead bodies wrapped in cloth. This is the story of how an ancient civilization tried to defeat decay, how they organized death like a science, and how they created one of the most mysterious preservation systems ever seen in human history. To understand why the ancient Egyptians invested so much time, effort, and knowledge into preserving dead bodies, we first need to understand how they saw life, death, and existence itself. They believed that a human was not just a body, but a combination of spiritual and physical elements that all work together. According to Egyptian belief, the soul needed to return to its body in the afterlife, and without a preserved body, the soul would have no home and no stability in the eternal world, which meant that preservation was not optional, but absolutely essential. This belief system was not limited to kings and nobles, because even ordinary people believed that without a preserved body, their souls would wander forever, unable to find peace or completion. Which is why mummification became an entire industry, a sacred profession, and a key part of Egyptian society for thousands of years. The ancient Greek historian Herodotus described how Egyptian embalmers offered families 3 levels of mummification based on price and quality, which shows that even in death, Egyptian society reflected its class structure, where wealth influenced how well your body would survive into eternity. These 3 methods were a high-level method for royalty and elites, a middle-level method for common citizens, and a basic method for the poor. Each one was different in complexity, tools, and effectiveness. The first and most advanced method was reserved for pharaohs, queens, nobles, and wealthy families. And this is the method that produced the best preserved mummies we see today. When a royal person died, their body was taken to a special embalming house, which was considered a sacred space. And here, trained embalmers, who were also priests, began the careful process of preparing the body for eternity. First, the body was washed using water from the Nile, because the Nile was believed to have divine life energy. And cleansing the body was both a physical and spiritual step, marking the transition from this life to the next. After this, the embalmers carefully removed the internal organs, including the lungs, liver, stomach, and intestines, because they understood that these organs decayed quickly and could destroy the body from within. But they always left the heart inside, because the heart was believed to be the center of consciousness, memory, and morality. According to Egyptian belief, after death, the heart would be weighed against the feather of truth during a divine judgment ceremony. And if the heart was heavier, meaning full of evil, then the soul would be destroyed forever, which is why removing the heart was unthinkable. The organs that were removed were cleaned and placed in special containers called canopic jars, and each jar was protected by a specific guardian god, whose role was to preserve these organs for the afterlife. After this, one of the most disturbing and unique steps followed, because the embalmers removed the brain by inserting thin bronze hooks through the nose, breaking down the brain inside the skull, and pulling it out piece by piece, since they believed the brain was not important and that intelligence lived in the heart. Once the internal work was complete, the body was covered entirely in a powerful natural salt called natron, which was found in dry desert regions and had strong moisture-absorbing properties. The body was buried in natron for around 40 days, during which all moisture was drawn out of the tissues, muscles, and skin, creating an environment where bacteria could not survive. and without bacteria, decay could not happen. After 40 days, the body was dry, fragile, and shrunk, so the embalmers carefully restored its shape by stuffing it with linen, resin, and other materials so that it would look as human as possible, because they believed the soul needed a recognizable home to return to. They then coated the body with special oils and tree resins, some of which had antibacterial properties, while others created a waterproof seal around the skin, forming a protective layer almost like an ancient form of preservation coating. Finally, the body was wrapped in long strips of linen, sometimes hundreds of meters long, with protective amulets placed between layers, and priests recited sacred texts during this process, turning the entire act into a spiritual ritual rather than just a physical procedure. When complete, the body was placed in a decorated coffin, sometimes inside multiple coffins, and sealed within a tomb designed for eternal rest. For citizens who could not afford the royal method but still wanted proper preservation, a middle-level method was offered, which was simpler, cheaper, and less detailed, but still effective enough to preserve the body to some degree. In this method, embalmers did not remove the internal organs individually because that required time, precision, and expensive procedures. So instead, they used a special chemical liquid made from natural substances, which was injected into the body and allowed to dissolve the organs internally. After this liquid dissolved the organs, the body was dried using natron, just like in the royal method, which removed all moisture and reduced decay. Once dried, the body cavity was cleaned, then coated with basic oils and resins, although not as many or as pure as those used for royalty. The body was then wrapped in linen, but usually with fewer layers and fewer protective amulets, because these materials cost money and the family's budget determined how detailed the process could be. The results were not as perfect as royal mummies, because facial details often degraded more, and the skin quality was less preserved. But many of these mummies still survived for centuries, and sometimes even thousands of years, depending on tomb conditions. For people who could not afford either of the previous methods, the Egyptians still provided a very basic option, because even the poor believed in the afterlife and wanted their bodies preserved in some form. In this method, there was no internal surgery, no chemical injections, and no complex wrapping, because these things required money and trained specialists. Instead, the body was simply washed and then placed directly in dry desert sand or buried in basic pits where the natural climate of Egypt would slowly dry it out over time. The extreme heat and dryness of the desert naturally removed moisture from the body, and in some cases, this natural process preserved bodies surprisingly well. After this, the body might be wrapped in simple cloth or matting, sometimes without a coffin and sometimes without even a proper tomb. But for the poor, even this level of preservation was seen as enough to prepare them for the afterlife. Egyptian mummification wasn't just one technique, it was a complete preservation system. Their dry climate reduced natural decay, natron eliminated moisture, resins sealed the body, linen protected it physically, sealed tombs protected it from air and humidity. Together, these factors created a nearly perfect preservation environment. What still amazes scientists is that even today, this level of natural preservation is hard to recreate. Some mummies still show skin texture, fingernails, facial details, and traces of hair or makeup, proving how precise their methods were. In the end, the Egyptians believed death could not be stopped, but existence could be preserved. Every mummy is not just a body, but a message from a civilization that refused to disappear. But here is the question that remains unanswered. If they understood death this deeply thousands of years ago, what other secrets did they discover that time has taken away? And what else lies hidden beneath the sands of history, waiting to be decoded? See you in the next chapter.